So tonight's report is on the universal pre-K within the district. So good evening and welcome, and thank you for being here. Really what I wanted to do was provide an overview of where we've been, where we are, where we're going, and then engage the board in discussion with any questions that you might have around our universal pre-K, and I promise to do my best to answer that. So, begin with the money. Money's always fun to talk about. This is our 23-24 UPK funding. Actually comes from two sources. We have $216,000 from the state, and we have $194,400 from the federal government, giving us a total allocation of $410,400. And really want to talk about, so what does that get us? That gets us 76 seats. So if you do that division, you get $5,400 per student. So it's 76 seats for that $410,000. The program is, as per the state requirements, 5 hours a day for 180 days. We would be likely running anywhere between 2 to 3 classes for a startup of January 1 of 2024, and really it's January 3, because we wouldn't start on New Year's Day. So January 3 would be hopefully when we can get through the litany of procedures between now and then. If we have more applicants than we have seats, it is not need-based, it is lottery-based for who can access. Right. And I want to talk about that a little bit because the words that the state is using is universal. And this is not universal yet. Because universal pre-K means everyone can access it. So the goal is, and the reason why the state is using the word universal is because that is the future goal, is to hopefully have enough funding where this could be a real universal pre-K program. So sometimes I feel like I'm being a little untrue by calling it universal pre-K because it is chosen by lottery system. It is not need-based. I do want to talk about, in addition to the $410,000 that have been allocated, this is a commitment on behalf of the district because our investment in this program goes well beyond the $410,000. So it requires administrative oversight. At this point, between myself, John, Rachel, Michael, Cameron, etc., there's been a lot of hours invested on behalf of the entire administrative team. And once it becomes operational, there is administrative oversight that is required by the host district of the program. We also have to invest in the curricular resources that the program uses, which is not part of the 410. And we also have to invest in outfitting those classrooms with furniture and materials. So that can come from a variety of sources, right? From wherever we end up, there may be resources that they already have. We may be able to use some of our own resources that we have in different places, and then we would have to purchase to make sure that the classrooms have what they need. So these are additional costs to the district, and I point that out because this, again, is an investment. It's something that, you know, the district as a whole, I know the board supports the education in the pre-K year of our students.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
So 5 hours a day for 180 days. So if, you know, that can be a lot for, you know, for younger kids. If someone says, hey, I want to not do 180 days, I want to do every other day or not those full hours, is there an impact? Or is that an option, or?
The program is set up for 5 hours a day. So there's no option for part-time. So a full day program is the 5-hour program. Again, pretty much securing from 9 to 2. The 180 days is the school days that we have kids in session. So when we have school in session, our UPK program is going to run in session. So really, you wouldn't be able to capitalize. And I think maybe it's a semantic difference, but I think it's important. When you're talking about the terms of daycare and preschool versus a pre-kindergarten program, really this program is designed so that students leave with kindergarten readiness skills to come into kindergarten. And we find most students that are in daycare and most students that are in preschool programs generally come out with those skills to have a lot more kindergarten readiness. It also allows the eyes of professionals on students to see where the developmental stages are and if you need to recommend additional services in the way of preschool, special education, and or English language learning skills that they might need to enhance and develop.
So can I comment here too? You know, you're talking about the universal, and this has been talked about at the Westchester Putnam School Board advocacy meetings, as well as the Lower Hudson Education Council. There's superintendents on that. And not every school district can afford. So here you're just saying like the classroom materials, the administrative materials, and universal. Not every district can afford to put these things into place. So if we, you know, let's pretend we didn't have the budget for this, we couldn't, you know, does the state kick in? Because if it's universal, that means all students eventually. So that's the challenge that, you know, our advocacy has to bring in, because this is extra budget lines for us, furniture for little people. It's not like we can take a desk from an extra high school classroom. It's very specific type of furniture, for example. That's interesting.
Dr. Sa, I had one comment and one question. The comment was just sort of the opposite end of what John was talking about here, which is that for parents who work full time, I think it's anticipated that the provider will also be able to, for a fee, offer before and after care, right?
Yes, and their fees are on their website. We actually spoke to them about this today. They would offer a program from around like say 7 a.m. to probably around like 6:30. So if you needed those couple of hours before and or you needed them afterwards and or whatever the schedule is, you could look on their website and look at what their monthly fees are based on what your needs are. It's quite a calculated process, so I'm not going to get too much in the weeds on it, but it's on their website. And you know, it is fair for parents to know that, because they can start comparing
Sure.
what they have now and what they could capitalize on, you know, with this free 5 hours for 180 days. It's not the full calendar year, and it's not always going to be the same for working parents' schedules and what the hours are. So absolutely, their fees for before and after are on their website.
And then one quick question is, I know, and I apologize for not asking this before, but you said we'd likely run 2 or 3 classes for the January 1st start, but there are 76 seats. That, I'm assuming that means we probably, for the January 1st start, might not have all 76 seats sort of up and running for that date. It'll be less.
Correct, and we might not have a demand for
up.
76 seats
Right.
either. So I'm gonna get a little bit more into the numbers,
Right.
and I think we can dig a little deeper for this. In terms of a January 1 start, it's not ideal. It's not ideal in the middle of the year. It's not ideal for 4 and 5-year-olds to be changing programs and to be changing providers, and we realize that. But I think when we go deeper into the presentation and you look at the steps that are needed, there's just no way that this could happen under the timeline that is given based on the conditions that we have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Thank you.
yes. So in this slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the parameters for entrance into pre-K. The first is residency. So our families have to go through the registration process and prove residency, that they are residents of the Pleasantville Union Free School District. The process includes providing, a parent had reached out to me about immunizations. That is part of our registration process, an annual physical, updated immunizations. Our process is outlined. This is work that we did last year to streamline against all 3 schools having a streamlined registration process. So that's on our website. The second is age. This is very different than kindergarten. There's a couple things I want to point out about this. Children must turn 4 years old on or before December 1st of the school year in which they are enrolled. That's it. End of story, period. A couple of important things. Remember, kindergarten is not mandatory in New York State. Number one. Number two is compulsory school age in New York State is turning 6. I think it's on or before, at least it's before that school year. So if a child, I think it's before, don't quote me on it, if a child were to turn 6 on November 30 days in November, on November 30th, they could miss that entire school year. So you have kindergarten not being mandatory and the compulsory age of students in New York State. This program doesn't give you any leeway. It is turning 4 on or before December 1st of the school year which they are enrolled. A practice used by some families is, we typically as educators call it the red shirt year. So if you have a kid who's a little young, like turning 5 in November, parents have the opportunity to redshirt them because kindergarten's not mandatory and they're not compulsory age until they're 6. So that is not the option here. You have one shot to make your UPK. You're only eligible for that 1 year. If you wanted to redshirt them from UPK, you've lost your opportunity to enroll in the program. If you wanted to delay, you have to do something else between.
Right.
You can't have 2 years of UPK.
Can't have 2 years in UPK. That's a really important piece of information for all the things that you just said, because they could go for their 4-year-old year, and then if they weren't quite ready for kindergarten, they have to find another place for that additional year until their parents feel the kids are ready for kindergarten. So these kids are really could be starting as early as 3, because if their birthday is October or November, they're 3 years old when they enter.
Yes. Okay.
So right, that's correct, right? They're not. What about the kids who are 4 turning 5 on December 1?
So I often say we have children in our school buildings, September, October, and November, that are 4 years old.
Right.
You can start kindergarten at 4 years old. If you're turning 5 by December 1st, then you're eligible for kindergarten. So if you're turning 4 by December 1st, then you're eligible for pre-K. So you could be 3, September, October, and November, turn 4 in December. So your UPK year, if you are born on or before December 1st, you could have up to 3 months of being a 3-year-old in pre-K and up to 3 months of being a 4-year-old in kindergarten.
Right.
Okay? So the program is being run by the YMCA of Central Northern Westchester. They operate UPK in 5 other districts. Their teacher-student ratios is that if you have a class between 1 and 16 students, you have to have 1 teacher and 1 paraprofessional. Paraprofessional is not a term typically used in Pleasantville, but it's ed jargon. It stands for anybody who's the assistant. Sometimes we have teaching assistants. They are certified by New York State. Sometimes we have teacher aides, and then there are other terms that are used in the pre-K world. So it's 1 teacher and 1 para. If you have a class between 17 to 21 students, you have 1 teacher and 2 paraprofessionals. How many kids are allowed in the class is determined by the fire inspector that goes on site and looks at the square footage and determines how many students can be in that specific classroom. So teachers are New York State certified for pre-K, or there is a New York State certified pre-K teacher on site as the director of the program. So when you looked at our RFP, it was built to have 5 classes. So just keep that in mind, that this is like a prorated, smaller scale project that if we could get anywhere between 2 to 3 classes up and running for January, hopefully it would be the startup so that come September of 2024, for the 24-25 school year, we would potentially be running at full tilt with all 76 spots eligible and available to families.
So Dr. Jasab, the budget you talked about initial is for 76 seats, right? So it could
Yes.
potentially be, it will likely be less for this school year. And then
That's our allocation. So how much we are able to actually, how much we're eligible for depends on the number of days, exactly when we get started up, and how many students access it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to confirm, the staff will be from the YMCA?
Correct.
Okay.
So the YMCA is hiring. Interesting, what we weren't expecting in this process is community members started reaching out to us, sending us their resumes. So we're like excited that we have potential community members that want to, you know, come back into the workforce or look for a change in their profession and want to go into this. So we're forwarding them onto the YMCA.
So with the, like the administrative oversight, so you have staff, so does the YMCA manage the staff and Pleasantville just manages the curriculum? Like, how does that?
Pleasantville has overall oversight of the program.
Yeah.
So we're not involved in, you know, we can train staff, we can work with them on our pre-kindergarten readiness, we can do and be involved in as much as we, you know, can take on, but we're not running the program.
Right.
And they are not our staff.
Okay.
So they are, you know, basically that allocation goes to them paying their employees
Yeah.
to run the program.
And what are the other districts that are
The
defined?
other, yeah, the 5 districts are Elmsford, Somers, White Plains, Yorktown, and Valhalla. And they have been with White Plains for over 10 years, doing their UPK program. They do that in a building at a district. So the combos are anywhere between, they're starting up their first year with them this year to over 10 years. Some are on site, meaning that, you know, districts have space in a building or they own a building. One district, I think they said they had a building that they weren't using and they were like leasing it out and now they're taking back part of that building. Other ones are operated similar to how we would operate, that it would be an off-site location. And some of them are in their schools because they have enough room in their school buildings to host the classrooms.
Yeah, some schools do have the space. That's the challenge. Some
Yeah.
schools have the space and some are full, like us.
Yep. One program, they have 2 districts in one site, but they're operating separate classrooms. So, you know, like 2 or 3 classrooms are for one school district, 1 or 2 or 3 classrooms are for another school district, even though they're sharing the same, site. So the people that we spoke to have been very happy with the YMCA. We've had a great response and a great ongoing communication with them throughout the process. It's a learning experience for us, bringing in a new program, even having done it in other districts. Every district is unique and has its own challenges and different ways of meeting the needs, and how you can access and spend the money changes as well. But overall, we've had really good feedback on the YMCA and their programs. A little bit more about the program in terms of the instruction. New York State has pre-kindergarten standards, so their delivery of curriculum is aligned to the pre-K standards. The focus is really on language development, literacy, and math, and developing social and emotional skills throughout. So there's a lot of hands-on play, again, very developmentally appropriate to this age group. So we talked a little bit about the furniture. That means rugs. That means sitting on the floor, playing with blocks, building things, talking to your friend, imaginary play. What are you building? How many blocks did you use? What shapes are they? It happens in a very developmentally appropriate. And if you've had children at that age, you can kind of envision that on a large scale with a bunch of them in the room. You know, just doing and engaging and developmental play that is appropriate for the age group and transitions into learning. In this program, our parents and guardians have to provide any of the snacks and lunch. If they're there for the breakfast hour, all the food is provided by the families, as is the transportation. So transportation and food, again, are provided by parents.
That's a good one.
Okay?
You think that's with most of the UPK? UPK.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, if you look at, I mean, this is years ago, but I remember looking at daycares. There was like one of them that was like, oh, lunch, you know, and snacks are included. Otherwise, it's, you know, you're packing them up
Yeah.
and you're sending them off. So, yeah, typical.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so a little bit about the process. The RFP is the request for proposal. So when we get this money. So I think this is interesting. I was thinking about this when you were asking the question before, Emily. So 21-22, the district had an allocation for UPK funding. We went out to RFP, no bidders. Year 2, 22-23, district gets an allocation, goes out to bid, no bidders. Strike 3, and we did not strike out, or pitch 3, and we did not strike out. 23-24, year 3, YMCA is our only bidder. So the first step in the process is to award the RFP, which is the next agenda item in our plan, in our agenda for tonight. And while this was happening, 2 other things happened. So, who was it? John and I and Rachel and Michael all went out. And Steve, of course. Steve, we all went out to Holy Rosary in Hawthorne, which is the proposed site at this point. And what I learned was there were students there working. It is the site where the district typically sends students for their discovery camp.
Where's that?
So parents might be familiar if you think about if you've dropped your kid off at discovery camp. So we went on a site visit. We met the treasurer and the priest, and we met people from the YMCA, and we all toured the site together, and we looked at what they have and what their setup is. In addition to that, I really wanted to get a sense of who's out there and who's really interested. So we put out an enrollment survey, and we have 78 families that responded to the survey that have an eligible age child, meaning they're turning 4 on or before December 1st, 2023. Now, of those 78, we asked who would be interested in enrollment for a January 1. And this information certainly did surprise me a little bit. 52 said yes, 21 said maybe, and 5 said no. So ironically, 73 are currently enrolled in daycare or preschool. I'm making a conjecture that maybe the 5 that are currently not enrolled in a daycare or preschool are not interested in the program, but that again is conjecture, not fact. So this again happened concurrent to building the RFP and having a bidder on the RFP.
So the site, it's already set up for young kids.
The site is set up that basically when if I was like looking at it, the church is like over here to the right, and then there's a playground and a grass area. There's like a back parking lot, and then there's like a U. And the school used to be the school for the Holy Rosary. So it's essentially set up, they were running camp in it when we went.
That's so great.
So you have classrooms, you have a cafeteria, you have a gymnasium. So
A gymnasium
the
too?
parts of the school that have to be, and I'm going to talk a little bit more at the end, have to be cleared by the Office of Family and Children's Services in order to be able to be used. But it's looking at a school.
That's
It's,
great.
You know, like a Catholic
I
school.
love that there's a gymnasium, because then on a rainy day, there's space for the kids to be able to, so many preschools, they don't have that room.
Yeah, the
And-
playground is really nice. There's backfields. There was a lot of stuff set up
Oh,
for
that's so
Discovery
great.
Camp. But, they have the space and the setup.
Great, Great,
We were
great.
even talking about like how drop-off would go and
Right.
that you'd be in the circle kind of coming through. So, yeah, I mean, the site was good. And let me talk about the site a little bit more in the next slide. So what has to happen next is a couple of things, or they're kind of going on now. Right now, the YMCA has to negotiate and sign a lease with Holy Rosary. You can imagine there might be some bureaucratic red tape. It's, you know, the Archdiocese is a large organization, so that's essentially who they're negotiating with. It's not a privately owned, you know, church, it's through the Archdiocese. So they have to negotiate and sign a lease to use the space. We have to negotiate our contract and sign the contract between Pleasantville Union Free School District and the YMCA. So those are two big things, the lease and the contract, that need to happen. And I want to point out that Holy Rosary is the proposed site at this point. There's obviously things that could transpire that could not allow that. YMCA is continuing to look for other options and other possibilities to have classrooms. So I know we have some local venues that they've reached out to and that they will continue to try to network with. And, you know, perhaps I can try to help them with that and trying to get a site in Pleasantville within the district. But for now, again, it's Holy Rosary and Hawthorne, which is where we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? After the lease and the contract, the next step would be to begin the registration process. We're hoping to be doing that by November, so that we can conduct the lottery if necessary, and then have our first day on January 3rd. And that is it from my end, but I want to open it up if the board has any other questions or items that they want to point out.
No, I just want to say thank you. I know this is a ton of additional,
Yeah.
somewhat unexpected work, since we don't typically get a response from the RFP, so thank you. I know it's a lot.
It's, you know, it's, like I said, it's new for us, so figuring out all of these things sometimes seems like a lot of steps. I'll just give like a for example. There's a survey that's due to state ed. And so, of course, I'm like, okay, so I'll go in and I'll do it. The first question had like project code numbers, like 16 of them. And it was like, what's your project code number? Okay, this is not gonna take me 2 minutes to figure this out. So, you know, then John's making 3 emails and 5 phone calls to find out. Like, we know the allocation, we know it, but they have so many different, they have part-time, full-time, they have 3-year-old programs and 4-year-old programs. So you can imagine every denomination of combination that can go into that. So there's always, you know, things, and I'm very happy to do this. I think that this is going to be huge for our district and a great advantage to our families and our students. One of the research pieces that I read, not recently, but it stuck with me, was the impact that COVID has had on these young children. Research has stood firm on the impact of language and the use and frequency of words that happen in a home and the relationship to students' language development. And what the latest research I had read from COVID is that during COVID, when families were required to be home with multiple children in the house and perhaps concurrently work remotely, the level of access to words that these students, right, like our current 3-year-olds, right, that lived through this had was much less on a whole. And so the talk was about what impact is this going to have when they enter kindergarten in a couple of years. And it's like, well, here we are. So when we talk about having the opportunity to put children in a pre-kindergarten, again, not a preschool or a day school, but a pre-kindergarten program that is structured in a way that is appropriate for them and develops all of those necessary skills in language, literacy, numeracy, and social and emotional development. It's just a tremendous opportunity that I'm so happy that we're able to capitalize on and hopefully bring to these families by January 3rd. So thank you. And I will be sending this out to our, what was my number, 78 families? Let me go back. And, you know, giving them an update on where we are in the process. They have a lot of questions, which is completely fair and understandable. We have been fielding emails and phone calls. Again, some anticipated and some not, on people that were even like looking for jobs. So it's been a great learning experience and a great opportunity to connect with our preschool families.